Why hasn't Iran been invaded? For decades, the world's most powerful militaries have threatened it, sanctioned it, surrounded it, and prepared for war. And then, on February 28, 2026, the threshold was finally crossed. The United States and Israel launched direct strikes on Iranian soil. The world held its breath. And yet, Iran is still there, not conquered, not broken, not swallowed, because every major power that has ever challenged it learned the same brutal lesson. And it wasn't taught by soldiers or strategy. Not the United States, not NATO, not Israel, not even at the moments when war looked inevitable, have ever crossed Iran's borders and successfully taken control. Because the lesson was taught instead by mountains that break armies, by deserts that need no weapons to kill, by a narrow strip of sea that holds the entire global economy by the throat. Iran doesn't need to defeat you, its geography does it for them. But here is what no map can show you. Behind the mountains and the oil and the missiles, there is something older. A civilization that has been standing here for 3,000 years, that has watched the Romans come and go, Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, the Mongols, the British, the Russians. All of them came. None of them stayed. So today we're not asking whether Iran is powerful. We're asking something far more dangerous. What happens when a country is too important to ignore and too ancient to destroy? To answer that, you don't start with politics. You start with the stone. Iran sits in one of the most dangerous locations on Earth, connecting Europe, Central Asia, South Asia, and the Middle East, in a single landmass where every major civilization and every conquering ambition eventually converged. And for centuries, this meant that major armies didn't move around Iran, they moved through it, as Romans, Arab caliphates, Ottomans, Mongols, and the British and Russian empires all collided here. Every major power eventually arriving at this crossroads, leaving something behind, while the land absorbed it all and remained. Modern Iran shares borders with 7 countries: Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Turkmenistan to the east, Iraq, Turkey, Armenia, and Azerbaijan to the west, with the Caspian Sea to the north, and the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman to the south. Sitting at the intersection of so many regions, roots, and rival interests, that attention from the outside world was never a choice, but an inevitability. But Iran's most dangerous feature lies offshore, where just off its southern coast, the Persian Gulf narrows into the Strait of Hormuz, a stretch of water barely wide enough for shipping lanes, and yet the passage through which roughly 1/5 of the world's oil shipments pass every single day. Since the early 1970s, Iran has maintained control over several strategic islands near the strait, giving it surveillance, missile placement, and regional reach, ensuring one quiet, unalterable truth: that Iran can never disappear from global calculations. And if Hormuz is Iran's leverage over the world, then the Zagros Mountains are its shield, a massive rocky barrier stretching from the Persian Gulf through Iraq and into eastern Turkey, steep, narrow, and logistically brutal. But the Zagros did something far greater than stopping armies. When the wave of Islam swept out of Arabia in the 7th century, absorbing everything in its path, Egypt, Syria, Mesopotamia, entire civilizations dissolved into the new Arabic-speaking world. The wave reached the Zagros, and Persia did not disappear. It became Muslim, yes, but it remained Persian, keeping its ancient language, its calendar, its poetry, its soul, because the mountains had not merely defended a border, they had defended an identity that the rest of the region had already lost. In 1980, Saddam Hussein believed he could do what Alexander and the Mongols and the Romans had failed to do: making the same mistake that commanders had made for 2,000 years, looking at a momentarily weakened Persia and seeing an opportunity where history should have shown him a warning. He sent his armies into the oil-rich province of Khuzestan, hoping for a rapid, decisive blow before Iran could recover from its revolution. On paper, the plan seemed elegant. After 2 years, Iraqi forces had never broken through the Zagros in force, their supply lines collapsing under their own weight as momentum bled away in the same narrow passes that had broken every army before them, until what began as a lightning strike devolved into an 8-year stalemate that consumed hundreds of thousands of lives, while the border barely moved a single inch. Iran endured not because it fielded the stronger army, but because the mountains wore down every invader's will long before any bullet could, as they always had, as they always will. To the north, the Zagros Mountains rise as a second wall along the Caspian coastline, completing a natural fortress that geography had been building around this civilization for millennia. And beneath both ranges lies extraordinary wealth: uranium, zinc, gold, silver, and the ashes of emperors like Cyrus and Darius, who turned this rock into the foundation of the ancient world's greatest empire long before the modern world knew the concept of energy. Then came the 20th century, and oil, massive reserves discovered near the Persian Gulf, transformed Iran into an energy giant almost overnight, making the calculus of invasion not just difficult, but potentially catastrophic for anyone who tried. And for those who somehow break through, another barrier waits in silence: the Dasht-e Kavir and Dasht-e Lut deserts, among the hottest and most hostile terrain on Earth, where surface temperatures approach 70 degrees Celsius, where vehicles overheat, fuel evaporates, and troops collapse long before they reach anything worth conquering. Before 1979, Iran wasn't America's enemy. It was one of its closest allies, and the Shah's Iran was a gleaming symbol of what Western-aligned ambition could build in the Middle East. Heavily armed, modernizing rapidly, and among the earliest Muslim-majority countries to extend recognition to Israel back in 1948, a relationship that seemed, to those watching from the outside, as permanent as the mountains surrounding it. That certainty dissolved overnight. The Islamic Revolution didn't simply change Iran's government, it rewrote the country's public face, as Ayatollah Khomeini repositioned Iran against the world order that had for decades treated it as a convenient piece on someone else's chessboard, terrifying neighboring Arab monarchies who feared the revolutionary fire would spread across their own borders, threatening kings, oil dynasties, and political systems built on foundations that suddenly felt dangerously fragile. But here is what the world misread in that moment, and has perhaps never fully corrected. The revolution of 1979 was not the birth of a new Iran. It was the latest expression of something 3,000 years old, a civilization that has always chosen its own path when the paths offered by outsiders led somewhere Persia did not wish to go. The Persian Empire under Cyrus had already written the principle of tolerance and sovereignty into clay when Rome was still a collection of villages on 7 hills. The isolation that followed 1979 was not weakness. It was a familiar posture, the same proud solitude that the Zagros had always made possible, the same civilizational instinct that had kept Farsi alive through the Arab conquest, the Mongol conquest, the British and Russian carve-up of the 19th century. And so, Iran found itself alone, diplomatically severed, economically sanctioned, militarily encircled, forced to confront a truth that would define every strategic decision it made from that moment forward: that borders alone were never going to be enough, and that a civilization surrounded on all sides with its own ancient language, its own calendar, its own 3,000-year identity would need to find a different way to survive. And from that solitude, Iran made a choice: that instead of exporting armies, it would export influence, building what it calls the axis of resistance. Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, militias scattered across Iraq, forces embedded in Syria, and the Houthis in Yemen watching over the Red Sea. Not a conventional military force, but a living network capable of applying pressure across the entire Middle East without a single Iranian soldier ever crossing a border. A strategy born not from strength, but from the cold, clear-eyed recognition that direct confrontation was too costly, and that fighting around the edges was the only way a boxed-in nation could project power beyond its own walls. Iran doesn't fight head-on. It fights around, and it fights cheap, in a mathematics of asymmetric warfare, where Western navies in 2024 fired missiles costing over $1 million each to intercept drones costing less than $20,000, while Iran's ballistic missile arsenal, the largest in the Middle East, with ranges exceeding 2,000 kilometers, ensures it never needs to win a war outright, only to make one too expensive to start. To this, add a nuclear program that remains deliberately opaque. Not quite a weapon, not quite not a weapon, while Russia and China quietly provide diplomatic cover, and Iran holds its hand over two global choke points, Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb. Iran's geography doesn't guarantee victory, but it guarantees uncertainty. And uncertainty in geopolitics is its own kind of power. This is Persia, wearing a modern coat. The coat has changed many times across 3,000 years. Achaemenid robes, Sassanid armor, Safavid silk, and now the flag of the Islamic Republic. But beneath every coat, the same civilization has been making the same calculation. How do we survive? How do we endure? How do we remain ourselves when the whole world seems determined to remake us in its own image? The answer has always been the same: the mountains, the desert, the strait, and the unbreakable conviction that this land, particular, impossible, ancient land, belongs to no one who arrives from outside it. Iran was not shaped into what it is by ideology alone. It was shaped by mountains that preserved a language and a soul when every civilization around them was being erased. By deserts that need no soldiers to kill. By a strait that holds the world's economy in quiet, permanent leverage. And above all, by a civilization that has been standing here for 3,000 years, watching empires arrive and dissolve into the sand, while the land itself remained unmoved. Geography gifted Iran its strength and Sitten too. Geography gifted into permanent confrontation, a fate written into the mountains long before any modern doctrine gave it a name. As the echoes of February 2026 linger, one truth remains unchanged. Iran cannot escape its location, and the world cannot escape Iran. Because in geopolitics, where you stand matters more than anything you carry. And Iran stands at the center of the world. It always has.